Hello again, and welcome to Stress Control Session 3. So, we've already covered in Session 1 learning about the course and understanding low mood, anxiety, and stress. In Session 2, we looked at managing the physical symptoms. We spoke about the fight or flight response and ways that we can help with managing the physical symptoms of stress, which is exercise, limiting your caffeine, alcohol, sugary, starchy, fatty food intake. And also we practiced breathing techniques as well as progressive muscle relaxation. So today on Session 3, we're looking at managing behaviours. And still to come, we have Session 4, which is about managing the negative thoughts. Session 5, which is managing the worry. And Session 6 is all about managing the future. So in today's session, we will focus on the changes in our behaviour and how those changes affect our vicious cycle. So how our behaviour can impact on our mood, our thoughts, and how we feel physically. So we'll look at the things that you can do to help challenge some of the negative behaviours and also increase positive behaviours. We'll also look at what panic is and how what we can do will either help or hinder us when it comes to panic. Again, we're going to have a look at avoidance and specifically at how we can overcome avoidance using a technique called exposure. Today, we will look at our behaviours and how our behaviours change and the impact that this can have on our mood. We can see here that the behaviours box of the vicious cycle is lit up green. In this box, it says, stop seeing friends and family, avoidance and safety behaviours. As we've said before, it's a two-way street between each of these boxes. Our stress feeds our behaviour and our behaviour feeds our stress. Well, this is good news for us because if we can learn ways to control our behaviours, we can control our stress. If we look at our behaviours and the way that we do things differently, or maybe not do things that we used to do before, for example, stop seeing friends and family, then that might impact back on our thoughts. Our thoughts, they tend to be negative and unhelpful. We might be thinking we're not good enough, feeling guilty, thinking we're useless, thinking the worst. And when we're thinking like that, no wonder it reinforces those behaviours and we stop doing things that we used to do, or we do things differently. It's going to make us feel quite low and overwhelmed, worried and panicked, tired as well and tearful. But if we feel quite anxious, we do tend to avoid things and we do tend to introduce safety behaviours as well. So things that we do to make the anxiety feel better. But anxiety, when we do those things, it just reinforces those bad thoughts, the thinking the worst, the anxious thoughts, our heart racing, feeling quite worried and panicked. And we're going to learn more as to why. So hopefully now you'll be familiar with your own vicious cycle and you will have been able to identify behaviours which may be contributing to keeping your vicious cycle going. When you suffer with stress, anxiety or depression, you might start to notice that you aren't doing as much. You're not seeing your friends, maybe you're not engaging in your hobbies, you might be avoiding opening the bills or doing the housework or going into busy places even. You might even notice that you're drinking more to be able to cope or eating more sugary foods for comfort. Often when we're stressed, we might notice safety behaviours. And these are the things that we do to help us cope at the time. And all of the above feels like it's helping, but it might actually be making things worse and feeding that vicious cycle. Let's start by looking at what happens to our behaviours when we feel stressed, low, or depressed. So you're feeling stressed, anxious, or low, down, distressed, ill. So you feel low in energy and you feel overwhelmed. So your motivation is at rock bottom. So it makes sense that you would reduce activities, maybe avoid places to be able to cope. But as a result, you experience less fun, less pleasure, and have less sense of achievement. Your energy levels begin to get even worse. You have poor sleep, difficulty concentrating, and your general health worsens. So you can see that by reducing activities or avoiding things, this can actually make you feel worse because it increases those feelings of hopelessness. And over time, the lack of activity can make your mood worse rather than better. Then, of course, you want to do even less, and this makes you feel even worse. So it's a downward spiral, or some people describe it as a black hole. So what behaviour changes might we notice? Probably stop doing our hobbies, not seeing friends and family as much, maybe sleeping more, not doing chores such as gardening, or maybe we're letting the house become messy. Maybe we're not opening the post, maybe avoiding busy places, drinking more, eating more sugary foods, okay? So when we're depressed, we do tend to withdraw from the world in general. We tend to do less of the things that we routinely do, things that we find pleasurable, or things which are necessary in life, such as paying the bills or doing the shopping. And this might help at first, because in the short term, doing less might actually make us feel better. It's that normal self-defense type of response. But as we said last week, doing less in the longer term also means that things do tend to pile up because they have to be done, and we might find ourselves doing less of the things that we enjoyed. So we've got more time to dwell on those negative thoughts. So we do need to look at how to reverse this cycle. We know that if we wait for an improvement in our mood to feel more positive and get a sense of achievement, then we could be waiting forever. So we have to start here by slowly increasing our activities. When we slowly increase our activities, our motivation starts to improve and our energy increases. Then there's an improvement in our mood and we feel more positive. We have a sense of achievement. So by slowly increasing our activities is where we can get in on the cycle. And this is called behavioural activation. It's a treatment that's often used to help people with stress, low mood, and depression. Behavioural activation is used for depression and low mood because lots of people with low mood have told us how helpful they found it to improve their mood. And a lot of research has shown it to be effective. It doesn't require you to concentrate for long periods of time or think too much. And we know these are both things that people suffer with when they've had depression or low mood. So it requires you to increase the things you're doing in the three main areas of your life. And these areas are routine activities, pleasurable activities, and also necessary activities. We know that just thinking about this might seem overwhelming as you're possibly struggling with low energy levels and tiredness. But the really helpful thing about behavioural activation is that it's done in a way that helps you to start doing things at a level that you choose. You will decide how much you feel that you can do. And by doing more activities, you might start to notice that you start to feel better, and actually your tiredness actually begins to lessen. I know this might seem a bit odd, but sometimes we do less because we feel tired and we're less energetic. So behavioural activation tries to break this cycle by encouraging you to start doing things again, a little bit at a time. This puts the spiral into a reverse and things start to improve. By taking the small steps, you'll start to feel better and have more energy and more confidence to take the next step. Best of all, you're the one who will set the pace and you're the person who's going to decide what to do and when. So, okay, how do we make these changes? Once you know what you've been avoiding or doing less of, we can start thinking about how to reintroduce it to help with your mood. And perhaps think of some things that you'd like to start doing for the first time. So start by making a list of the things that you need to engage with. There's a worksheet to do this in your workbooks. And then from that list, identify the activities that are necessary, that are routine, that are pleasurable activities. And there's also a worksheet for that in your workbooks too. By routine, we mean the things that you used to do regularly. And they might include things like cooking or cleaning, shopping for food, maybe walking the dog, shaving, washing, having a bath or a shower, things like that. Pleasurable activities are the things that you used to enjoy before your low mood. Or indeed, they could be new things that you think you would enjoy and maybe like to try. These are very much down to individual choice, because what one person enjoys, another might really dislike. Only you can really know what these are. But examples might be going out with friends, going to the park for a walk. And then the necessary activities. So these are the activities that are often very important and for which there's going to be a consequence if they're not done. For example, paying bills, getting an MOT for the car, taking the kids to school, maybe ensuring that your phone works to let them know how you're getting on, or completing a sick note if you're off work. Okay. Then start small and begin to schedule a small task from your list each day. Make sure you have got a mix of the different activities, whether that be routine, pleasurable, and necessary. Mix them up throughout your day to help with motivation. So something from each of the lists. A helpful tip is to try and break the activities down. For example, if you've put on your list to clean the house, then that could be broken down into a number of smaller activities, such as cleaning the lounge, cleaning the kitchen, cleaning the bedroom. And if this seems too daunting, then you could always break them down even further. So just to tidy the lounge or hoover the lounge. And you could keep going on doing this until you've broken the task down to a point that you felt that you could manage it. So this is what we mean by starting small. Another helpful tip when you're planning your activities is to try and be as specific as possible when you describe your activity. So try and include what you're planning on doing, where you plan on doing it, and who you're planning on doing it with. Okay. Then use the diary that's in your workbook to schedule your activities for the next week. And each week, slowly start to build up the number of activities. If all is well, then over time, you'll notice that your diary begins to fill up once again, and you'll notice yourself getting back into your regular activities. A few things to remember is not to expect too much too soon. Some weeks you might find that the goals are quite easy to achieve, but other weeks might be a real struggle. So you might not achieve all of the activities that you set yourself. Know that this is perfectly normal and to be expected. But either way, it's great, because whatever happens to you, you're learning how to move forward and you're learning how to steer your way back towards feeling better. I would say don't expect to feel better immediately. It can take time to get this ball rolling, and you might find that you start to feel that you've achieved things before you actually start to experience pleasure, satisfaction, or a sense of achievement again. The main thing is just to keep going, and the pleasure and the sense of achievement will return. And don't forget that it's you that's in control, so you should go at the speed that you want. Nobody's going to put you under any pressure to go any quicker than you want to. So that's a really useful technique called behavioural activation. And now we've focused on how our behaviour changes, we can move on to how we feel when we're stressed, low, depressed, and on to panic. So this is a common vicious cycle for somebody who is struggling with panic. We get a sudden rush of intense fear, and soon we're unable to stay still. Our heart's racing, our legs are turning to jelly. Remember when we spoke about fight or flight from last week? We might think, I'm going to die. And so it would definitely make sense to avoid things that could trigger that fear. Because if we see it again we get that sudden rush of intense fear and we go round in this vicious cycle. So panic attacks are really scary. They cause you to feel out of control. They can trigger avoidance, so you want to run away, but they're not harmful. Anyone who suffered with panic will remember the first panic attack. They'll tell you that they thought they were going to die and that the heart was beating out of the chest, so they just needed to escape that situation. So of course they would want to avoid anything that might cause the panic attack to happen again. You don't necessarily have to have many panic attacks, but it's just the dread of having another one that feeds that anxiety and panic. Like we've said, panic attacks are scary and they feel horrible, but they aren't harmful. Remember fight or flight. When we panic, our fight or flight takes over to keep us safe. So we want you to know that they're not dangerous. Our body is trying to keep us safe. Now let's have a look at the types of panic, because there's the ones that you can expect. These are the ones that you can predict. You might start to work out where the panic happens. It might be busy places, it might be at work, in lifts, and often these are the kind of places that we start to try and avoid. But then there's the ones that you can't predict. Sometimes we're just relaxing and the panic hits us, and these can often be the scariest because they seemingly come out of the blue. We're just watching telly, we're sat at home, and then there it is, the panic attack starts. Then the other times that we have panic, it might be that we wake up in a panic and we feel like we need to stick our head out of the window and gasp for air in the middle of the night. And these are really scary. But what we're about to see is that actually sticking your head out of the window and gasping for air is the worst thing that you can do. So bear with me with that thought. We struggle with anxiety, stress and low mood, and that makes us more susceptible to panic. That makes it even more important to try and reduce our stress, because this will help us to decrease the likelihood of having a panic attack. Most of us will experience panic at some point in our lives, but we might not always recognise it for what it is. Panic attacks are all to do with our breathing. Now, we all know that oxygen is the food that keeps our bodies alive. When we breathe in, oxygen goes into our lungs and then into our bloodstream and then out to each of the millions of cells in our bodies. The cells then gobble up all this oxygen because it's their food, and they convert it into waste or carbon dioxide, which is then pushed back out into the bloodstream, into our lungs, and breathed out through our mouths. For our bodies to remain stable and calm, we need a good balance between the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. And so the rate at which you breathe should relate exactly to how much energy you need. So with each breath of oxygen that goes in, it should be completely gobbled up by all of our cells. So the rate of breathing should vary according to what we're doing, but the balance should always remain the same. As you can see, if we were sat watching telly at home, we would breathe more slowly and take in less oxygen because our muscles are fairly still and they don't need that much energy. So each breath goes into our lungs, into your bloodstream, and then is gobbled up by the millions of cells in your body. But then, later on that day, if we go for a run, our bodies obviously need more oxygen to make our muscles work quickly. So we need more energy and we take in more oxygen and breathe out more carbon dioxide. But look at this graph. The big thing is that the balance between the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in the body is maintained. Whether you sat in front of the TV or you're going for a run, it's still 50-50. So this is showing us that even though your breathing speeds up to get more oxygen into your lungs, into your bloodstream, it is all gobbled up by the cells and all converted into waste and all breathed out as carbon dioxide. That's the important part. But look at what happens to the balance when we panic. When we panic, our breathing rate quickens and we take in more oxygen. So this is what is happening. You're breathing faster, so a lot of oxygen goes into your lungs, then into your bloodstream. But when it reaches those millions of cells in your body, the cells gobble up some of the oxygen, but because they don't need that much food, because you're not on a run, you're just sat in front of the TV or wherever, they push the rest of the oxygen back out into your bloodstream, where it starts to slowly build up. Not only is the oxygen building up in your bloodstream, but the carbon dioxide levels in your body start to drop because the cells haven't converted the oxygen into waste. This causes the signs of panic because less blood is reaching your brain, and this might result in you feeling quite dizzy, faint, confused, unreal, breathless, like you're choking, and blurred vision. Recognise those signs and symptoms? So as well as less blood reaching the brain, less blood is also reaching other parts of your body, and this might result in a raised heart rate, numbness, tingling, particularly in your hands, your feet, around your nose and your mouth, stiff muscles, and cold and clammy hands. So now the body's working really hard, and that'll result in you feeling quite hot and flushed and sweaty. We're quite tired out, probably got aches and pains, especially in your chest, and you might yawn or sigh a lot. And keep that in mind for what we're going to look at on our next slide. So all of these signs and symptoms that I've just mentioned aren't caused by panic or stress, but they're actually caused by simply breathing too quickly for your needs. So hyperventilation, hyper is too much and ventilation is breathing. When it comes to hyperventilation, it can come on quickly, but that doesn't really happen in real life. It's more likely that your breathing changes quite slowly. So imagine that you just sat at work and you normally breathe in 11 times a minute. You breathe out then 11 times a minute, and that's perfect. So each breath of oxygen goes into your lungs, into your bloodstream, and then all of that oxygen gets gobbled up by your cells. They convert it into carbon dioxide and push that waste back out into your bloodstream. You've got a great balance between the oxygen and carbon dioxide in your body. And as a result, your body stays stable. But maybe at work, you're a bit stressed out one day, your boss comes and puts some extra work onto your desk and he sets you a really tight deadline. So instead of breathing 11 times a minute, you just start to breathe 12 times a minute. No big deal. You don't notice any changes. But each minute that goes by, you've got one more breath of oxygen that isn't used up by the cells. And so it just lies there in your bloodstream. This means that because it's not converted, you've got one less amount of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream. So second minute, 2 extra amounts of oxygen, 2 fewer amounts of carbon dioxide. 68 minutes in, you've got 68 extra amounts of oxygen and 68 fewer amounts of carbon dioxide. The balance is changing slowly but decisively. So at 93 minutes in, you take 1 extra breath that acts as the straw that broke the camel's back, and you start to feel absolutely horrible. Yet 93 minutes later, you've left work. You're now sat on the bus on your way home, so you've got no explanation for why you feel dizzy, why you feel breathless, why you feel confused. You've got no explanation for why your heart's racing and why your hands are tingling. If you're aware of what has been happening over the last 93 minutes, you might say, oh dear, I think I might have been hyperventilating. But as you've not been aware of this, you're more likely to think, I'm having a panic attack. And it seems out of the blue. But yet the panic has actually been caused by very subtle changes to your breathing. So hyperventilation might seem like a bad thing, but we do need it for fight or flight. Because when we need fight or flight, our bodies need all that extra oxygen for the energy. The problem with panic is that we aren't using the extra oxygen, and the side effects of that is really, really unpleasant. And like I said before, the side effects include feeling dizzy, faint, confused, unreal, breathless, like you're choking. You might have blurred vision, a raised heart rate, numbness, tingling, stiff muscles, cold and clammy hands. You might feel hot, flushed and sweaty, tired out, and have aches and pains. Lots of symptoms. So these are all symptoms and signs telling us that we're hyperventilating. And if we can pick up on these signs and symptoms quickly enough and control our breathing, we might stop the panic attack from emerging. Remember earlier I said that a sign might be that you yawn or sigh a lot, and your body is recognizing that it has too much oxygen building up in your bloodstream, and it's just trying to get rid of some. So if you're yawning but you're not really tired, or you're sighing a lot but you don't really know why, check in with your breathing. Have you actually been hyperventilating but not noticed? Okay. So just to emphasize again, all of the signs and symptoms are caused by hyperventilation, but you're hyperventilating because of stress. So you'll only go into a panic attack if you interpret the symptoms as dangerous. Remember, we said they aren't dangerous. They're symptoms of fight or flight, and fight or flight is trying to keep you safe. So let's have a look at how hyperventilation feeds the vicious cycle. So we feel stressed. This leads to the hyperventilation, which causes too much oxygen and too little carbon dioxide in our bodies. It's having that too much oxygen and too little carbon dioxide that causes the unpleasant symptoms like our heart racing or that choking sensation. And if we interpret those as being dangerous and we think, I'm going to die, then that just feeds the stress. I hope you're also thinking about what would happen to the vicious cycle if you controlled your breathing, controlled your physical symptoms, controlled your thoughts, and controlled your behaviours, because that's what we're going to talk about after the break. So I think now is a good time to have a 10-minute break and come back then for part 2 of session 3.